All right, Muriel Naim, writer, director. I saw two of your shorts. I saw Janek slash Bastard,
Mm.
and I want to say
Yeah,
Javier,
yeah. Janek,
Javier.
Janek, thank you for adding the bastard. It's sometimes people just pick one of the other, but it was kind of intentional. So I'm happy that chose both. And
Thank
yeah,
you,
and Javier was my
Javier.
very first little one day made short in color arts.
Yeah, it was well executed. Great idea, well executed.
Thank you.
You were nominated by Yoel Rush, and very happy to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Um, Janek slash Bastard was a intense, brutal world that you depicted, and it was a very powerful film, extremely well made. I
Thank you.
mean, it is incredibly the highest standard. I mean, it is ridiculous. The acting was superb. The subject matter that you bit off at your age, is intense. And the way you pulled it off is just masterful. It was a masterful film. Definitely. Definitely. And I look forward to talking about it and your artistry. So the first question of Play It Forward, and we'll focus on Janek slash Bastard, is what gave you the impetus, the kernel, the seed, emotionally, psychologically, to make the film?
Good question. I think it was a mix of different things, but I actually can say that how it came about, not typically how you may imagine. I am My ideas come subconsciously many times, actually, the ones that I feel closer to. I believe a lot in the brain that works extra hours that we're unaware of. And I was handing it in, for green light, from the studio. And then I got another film greenlit, actually. And there's a few nights before the big first meeting of production. And I just had this really intense dream. I woke up and I wrote a few notes. And I didn't know what I wrote, but I was like, oh, wow, I need to make that film right now. I'm sorry. So I took a night and I wrote the script, and I handed it in. And after I started reading it, I realized it's actually my grandfather's childhood story that kind of infiltrated this film. But my grandfather is the boy that I'm killing. And the boy that was in the house that was very jealous of him is really my protagonist and who I felt in a way closer to. And that was disturbing to begin with. But that's what I wrote. And I believe in executing things that makes you afraid. So essentially in this film, I killed my grandfather where he wasn't killed, of course, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. But the emotional core that made me want to make it is a bit of a complex message, but in its simple core is how powerful and how incredibly dangerous something as simple as jealousy can be, and how brutal can be the effect of others on one's mind. Because I don't think this little boy even knew what he was doing. And then the other thing that I realized after I wrote it, and it really rang Nietzsche to me. I think it is a Nietzsche quote from this book, Zarathustra. Like, I think he said, in tragedy, naivety is not enough. And it's true. So it's really about kind of the turmoil, the internal turmoil of not exposing emotion. And it's a lot about jealousy. And it's an emotion that I can't say I felt in my body a lot growing up, but I think it was very tucked inside very deeply. So yeah, essentially there's a bunch of this stuff, but you can hear the intense motions of where it came from. It's not accidental that it's an intense film. But I had the need to tell this story of my grandfather that he never talked about really, just glimpses and pieces. But I felt the intensity from this other boy. And when I wrote the film, I really didn't expect it to be from the other boy's perspective. It just came about.
Wow. I mean, it's really cool how you interwove these two stories, and one being repressed emotion on both sides, really. I mean, a
Yeah,
repressed story from your grandfather that was too painful to be discussed, but you knew of it.
yeah.
Um, and then your own repressed emotion of jealousy and discomfort with feeling what that was for you, and that it somehow wove itself together into this story. And the one of the strong messages of it is the, just like you said, the powerful, violent, destructive nature that jealousy can be.
Oh yeah, I think it can be way worse.
Yeah. And it's incredible because I think we all can resonate with that as human beings, knowing, whether it's been in ourselves or in others, and we've been victims of it or the perpetrators of it. It's really it's definitely brave to connect with the perpetrator, because I think in order to overcome it, it has to be acknowledged.
I 100% agree. I think if you don't, also coming from as complex and problematic country as Israel, that I'm very well aware of,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons I'm not there, nothing to do against the country, but it's so complex. And I think understanding the complexity and opening a door for talking,
Yeah.
um, opening a door, like I'm not saying talk your way out, just something is just the only way to go. I
Right.
don't think it's possible in any other way, pretty strictly. And yeah, emotion is powerful and very frightening and exciting to me. So I think that's kind of at the bottom and the soft, stomach of all of my stuff.
Intense emotion in general
Oh
is
yeah,
what you're exploring, you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
emotion and this repression, which I wish I didn't have in my body as a person, but I definitely do. I
Yeah.
think it's very deep, Ran. I think it's not just familial, but generational. Um, and also there is, of course, beautiful things about emotion. So it's a push and pull.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the repression is a thread in both my family trees and quite palpable and very frightening, I think.
Mm. Well, you're certainly not alone there, and it's very brave of you to, discuss that openly. Um, you know, it's certainly there's skeletons in every family closet, and
100%.
they're there, and by nature, by character, by animal instinct, it's just this violence that humanity has in it that we are all in the process of hopefully working through and overcoming, and allowing the more beautiful sides of our emotion to govern
Yeah,
our own
balance is
our
balance
own
is very
balances. Balance, yeah. So that leads us, I mean, you've answered it, certainly. I often probe filmmakers because um when you ask why again on the same question, you get a little bit, oftentimes, most times you'll get a richer answer. So, I know you're aware to a great extent of the emotional subconscious forces that influenced you to write this. And if I asked you why again, does it bring up anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think this emotion was unaware in my body. I mean, by itself. I never experienced that consciously. I'm very not a jealous person. I'm like a go-getter. If I can get something, I'll get it. If it's hard to get it and still I can get it, I'll get it. And if I can't get it, I'll leave. That's who I am. So to me, it's kind of revealed some truth that I wasn't aware of. So it was so repressed. There's so many emotions, so repressed, I think, again, both in my body and in, I know, other people's bodies as well, especially these two woven stories. Um, so it was kind of an Eid
Mm,
film, like all these things I'm telling you, I know in retrospect, I had no idea about them when I
of
wrote it
course,
down. I had no idea. I was like, what
of
is this weird
course.
dream?
Of course.
It's killing, causing the, what is that? I really didn't know.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I think that's what happens when I write, which is the better cases. I'm an unaware writer, but I believe in the subconscious brain. I think there's a lot going on there. I think this brain is smarter than the aware brain, and I think we're not aware of a glimpse of what exists in this animalistic, also
Yeah.
extremely sophisticated mechanism. So yeah, I'm very intrigued by subconscious thoughts. I think they're
Yeah.
also very frightening.
For sure.
That's where it came from. So in retrospect, it's basically maybe exploring this emotion that I never really fully looked at because I don't characterize really by that.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
told that. Not my typical characteristic, but exists
Yeah. Yeah.
and causes great harm. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
If not outwards than inwards.
Well, in the film, and thank you for that. I definitely am a champion, or I agree with you about the collective unconscious. There is that part of it that is expansive, beyond our own self-identity. In the film, and this leads me to the second question of play it forward. In the film, that jealousy culminates in a betrayal, and the betrayal culminates in death. And in this case, it's a physical death, but I think I think oftentimes in people's lives, certainly in my experience, um, that I can connect to very recently, it feels, there's a psychological death between people that are family, close to you, and just like this boy. So as this is kind of a two-part question. As you reflect on the movie, I think maybe it is more pertinent to ask you this part of the question. I usually will ask, well, as you're writing it, what do you feel the message of the film was or is? But as you reflect on it now, watching it, what do you feel the message of the film is for you?
That's big. As I reflect is a really good question because I think if a piece is coming from like a deep place, it has motions and it changes for you as a person, not just the person that made it, just any person. So I'm gonna try to think about right now. Mm. I think actually it's about sitting in a bad place and letting it take its toll and not letting it take its course that's without your control. Because the amount of regret, which is the aftermath of this film, which I think is even more intriguing than the film, that's the reason for this last shot. That is what freaks me out the most. Like the things you could have, should have, didn't. Misses, that is probably the most frightening feeling to me. Not jealousy, not meanness, not arbitrary violence. Like, that's not freaking me out. The freaking me out thing is like you can't bring it back. That's like probably a deep, deep, deep fear. So I think the message in retrospect really, or like the core, is really letting the bad take its toll live, not do its work without you aware of your actions. And that's very frightening. And I think many people that are in their conscious mind, right? There's sociopathy and there's other chemical imbalances, but the majority is a lot of repressed emotion, a lot of repressed feelings, a lot of repressed violence. I know I'm saying something really weird. That's not
Not at all.
very lovely, but
Not at all.
let it happen when it comes upon and put it into action. Referencing Alice Miller, I guess, a little bit maybe. I just read this the picture of the brilliant child recently, and bet you heard about it or read it maybe.
I think maybe I heard of the book.
It's very interesting
yeah.
and troubling at the same time, but
Yeah.
she basically says to sit in that like very intense feelings, and
Yeah.
the more adult you become, the even less really let themselves kind of experience this Eid. So it's going to be a wild world in which everyone, you know, are sitting in their Eid feelings, but at the same time, I feel like it can be a way more beautiful world, because the results of those turmoils that are crescendoing in your body are so much more dangerous than just feeling those small, intense, bad, even violent moments that you can give place to consciously, and not let them take their toll on you, because then you can sit in a horrible feeling called regret the rest of your life.
Yeah. In other words, what you're saying is to permit oneself to suffer through the injury or through the feelings that are perceived, whether they're real or not, and to experience your own emotion.
Yeah.
Before unconsciously.
If it leads to hard things, okay, it's probably going to lead to way less hard things than the other emotion will lead to. So I guess I'm saying, maybe that's the real message to myself there, really.
Well, that's great, you know, and that's a very mature state of awareness, to be at a place where you're not pushing and pulling emotion, but you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
And allowing it to pass.
Yeah, and it's frightening. It's frightening. You don't know what's going to come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, you think, will it ever end? You know, and it does. It passes. It passes. It does. Definitely. Definitely. Okay, cool. So the last question to play it forward, since you've made the film, how have you been changed by it?
No, those are big questions. I think I may have been changed by the process even more than I was changed by the film itself, although it definitely did something to me. So I guess two things I can focus on: the making, which was very intense. It wasn't like, oh, nice, you know, block light rehearse. Like I did a lot of stuff in the shoot that stretched a lot of the both abilities and the awareness of my crew and cast. It didn't came upon by accident. I would just say, like what you mentioned and all these intricacies are all very well planned. And it was a very intense shoot also in many other ways, with weather conditions and a lot of kids on set. My main character didn't know anything about the script throughout until the end. So we had to build everything around this kid. Yeah. And it's hard because it's a very intense film, right? So you have to have some psychological, you know, I believe in taking care of your actors very much. So I'm very, very caring towards my actors. And, you know, living in your body and an emotion of someone else is very dangerous. As a past actor from theater, something I was very lost in many times. If I portrayed really intense characters, you can get, you know, really pulled in if you're really sitting in their body. And doesn't matter how it's cold outside. If you're in someone else's body entirely and you experience this really intense things, it can be dangerous. Like you have to lead your actors, and if it's kids, your kids really, really sensitively through it while portraying really intense things. So that I can talk about for a while, but you know, that was one thing that changed me a bunch. Is I almost experienced this repression as I was shooting. You know, and that's something that I think is very hard to be in. I'm very expressive when I shoot, and it's a non-communicative film. And you have to communicate the most as a director, right? So I had a lot of systems in place, but I think in many ways, you have to put like a layer of disconnect when you make. That's really hard. Especially if you're really feeling the moments and if you're really crafting them like moment by moment. Just you need to be aware of like not sitting in the emotion with the actors, with the crew too closely. And what is the balance really? And it's really about balance. The word you said before, I think very much resonates with me. So I learned a lot about balance, kind of picking at it later. and also seeing the result and getting what I wanted. And what was the price for that? And then it was a really really hard shoot. We had like live sets. I did a bunch of stuff to make the acting as pristine as I could, and to create this suspense of disbelief that you will not be able to tell for 1 second this is not the moment in time that is happening. We taught the kids polish. I mean, that's a really hard language to learn. There's a lot there. There's a lot. Basically, I broke all the AFI rules for production in this production. So there's a lot of bureaucracy to fight with this film, and it wasn't easy. So yeah, just I think gentleness towards crew is extremely important, and bringing the right people with you and making sure they get the process is really important. I did a lot of like magic tricks there with directing. I didn't share, so people were like,
"Oh yeah, what do you mean?
Wild." So one of the things they did was creating live sets, so repetition of the actors around the main character, so that when this little boy is inserted into the situation, he can, if he has like a sentence to say and that's all he's saying or nothing at all, I took away a lot of his text. I took a lot of the dialogue away when I realized it will only work as well as I want it to work if it will be imminent, like not pre-planned, not expected, almost like working with a non-actor, although this boy was an actor. But the emotion that I needed from him, I found after the audition as almost like as an aftermath. When he left the audition, something didn't work in the audition. And he had this like growl. His mom called him and he was impatient. And he had this growl when he left the audition. And I was like, whoa, I need that. So I needed his subconscious self more than I needed his conscious self. And that is tricky, right? You have to be super careful with the boy. And I was. But I knew that the only way I can get the core, this fire out of this character, portrayed by this boy, is if he doesn't know what's going to happen. So I had to create, and this was a few nights before the shoot, and I was like, oh Lord, okay, wow, that's going to require a lot of work. So I created live sets. Basically, all the other actors had repetitions of the scenes. So there's a chicken plucking scene. It was a repetitive motion of the mother, plucking that chicken for maybe 20 minutes, camera rolling, and at some point he enters the scene.
So without knowing. So she's just doing her thing. And so that's what you mean by live set.
Oh, yeah.
You mean they're engaged in their action. They don't know how long.
They're engaged in real action, the plucking and, the rain, like everything is real, very real. Repetition of it. And
so at some point in time, unbeknownst to the person who's engaged in the plucking and to the boy, you say, okay, go. And he'll go into the scene, and then he has the one line that you've given him.
Yeah, he didn't even have a line in the specific scene, right? So it was like a very natural, I'm not going to say because it was kind of, we created our own system in talking about someone resonating in his life that, he had an emotion towards, and I utilized that before I was with him. Also, I had to run around behind the camera. There's like a lot of this house to make sure he's feeling secure and he's not just getting at it alone. Almost like kind of mind control a little bit, right? You have to be very manipulative in many ways with kid actors, both to support them, but also to make sure they get where they need to go, especially if they don't know what's going to happen, right? So this kind of soft balance made me had to stand behind him before going into the scene, and I had to run behind the house and make the small motions of what's going to happen. And naturally, he wanted to carve. He clearly didn't want to go and pluck the chickens with his mother. It was a real chicken, that was dead that she was plucking, and not the loveliest action. And that's also the motion of this parenting. He was way closer to his dad, but his dad was pushing him away for many reasons. By the way, some of them are really tough. I can talk about it another time. It's like almost it's a scene I cut off. It's like a whole film by itself. But he was really inclined. He wanted to get closer to carving this little dog. This like soft motion of learning this craft. It was the natural go, and that was the scene itself too. And then what happened is really also natural. So it was really naturalistic. It was like it's like very well posed environment, but naturalistic moments of this boy inside a lot of those scenes, maybe 90%. Strict rule of him not knowing anything about the script that we kept really tight. It was a big crew. It was a big shoot. It wasn't as small, bare bones as I'm used to. So it was really.
How many people do you have on set?
We eventually, I guess, the cast was around like, right, 5, 6 people, and the kids are sort of overall like 8. And then the crew was somewhere between 35, and then one of the days was 45.
Huge. That's huge. Yeah. I mean, the
Really large.
lighting, I mean, the director of photography just killed it.
She definitely killed it.
She
We did
killed
so
it.
much pre-work on
Oh my God.
texture, and the main reference for us before when we talked about it. I'm saying for us because we talked about it together, but then she made it all happen. Obviously, I have no idea how to make that happen. So it was a lot of oil painting references and a lot of Van Gogh, like the potato spot. And we really went into we watched a lot of, not films, but we actually went to shows and we looked into artworks because I really wanted it to have this texture of oil painting to it.
Mm-hmm.
So she translated it to very small sources of light, and she did a lot of insane things there that I'm very impressed by. And it was
She
really
killed it.
It was really,
it was
really
amazing.
what we talked about, which is rare that you can actually get your vision, into a picture.
Oh God.
She really, really killed it. Yeah.
So to get back to the question, how were you changed? I mean, you've learned some things, but how were you changed?
How did I change? I think it matured me in many ways. I think the process, and it's such a tough push and pull because I believe in emotion. I am very afraid to not have emotion as strong in the body as it can be. And kind of learning to kind of roll with the punches and learning this balance has the danger of stepping away from intense emotion, right? Because if you see all sides and you keep seeing all sides, then how long are you actually staying in your intense body of emotion if you're starting to see a lot and understand a lot? That's a little frightening to me, but I think striking a balance was what I learned. And I'm still afraid of it. I mean, the more balanced I am, which is a part of maturity, in a way, the more you get away from your intense emotions. And I feel like if you don't have emotions, you might as well die. So that's me. I know not everyone are like that, but I'm a big believer in feeling in your body. So, it grew a fear and a balance, but I learned a lot about when to let it be, I suppose, more than, when to control it and when to give it its place. And in retrospect, I also learned that sometimes my grandfather watched the film. I was very afraid to show it to him, obviously. And he didn't talk about it. It's a very, really imagine the word repression, put it in a dictionary, put the
right. His picture.
And that's really the thing.
I got it. Yeah.
Stone. A lot of emotions, stone.
Yeah.
And he watched this film in a screening we had in the Cinematheque in Israel, I think, and there's like some person kind of hosting it, and they were calling me, and they're like, oh, maybe I heard your grandfather is here, the story is based on blah. Maybe he can come up, and I was like, just gave him the microphone. I wondered what he wants to say. And I saw something insane. And that was worth the whole making of the film, if anything. It was just walking. I never saw my grandfather like that. It was walking in like he started talking and he didn't say anything. So he was like, yeah, I feel, and he kept talking. This guy's like, was a bank manager,
so
grew is from zero.
Yeah.
I was just looking, I was staring at him because I was like, what is going on? My mother was like, I never saw my father like that. And he was just like walking in like little circles, like a little boy. And then he started crying and he said, this was really the house. It was really the house, and you like experienced that again.
It's beautiful.
And I was just like, like goosebumps. I was sitting there being like, oh my God.
That's
like, that's exactly the house. That's exactly how the house was, exactly that way. And I was like, he never told me how the house was. There's a lot of stuff like that just made him be in his body in that sense. And he never cried in front of any of our office in the film. There's a lot of stuff coming out of it. So I think exactly that, right? This is exactly about that. It's like experiencing of emotion. And bringing it back into his visual memory. Yeah. That was big for me. That was a big takeaway.
That's awesome. All right, Muriel Naim, thank you so much. Wonderful, talented writer, director. And as we were talking about earlier, keep it pure and, that's all that matters.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to being in touch and, just all the best, well done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate those really deep questions and your attentiveness to the film. Not obvious today. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.